For Love and Bourbon by Katie Jennings. Keep your friends close and your bourbon closer. Old Kentucky Proverb. Prologue. Belfast, Northern Ireland. Fine Irish whiskey fueled his temper. That same whiskey kept him from hurling his glass into the wall, the drink too precious to waste. Even in this state of rage he maintained control, a skill he was well known for. A skill he utilized now in the face of this most disappointing of news. Ned Brannan released a slow, measured breath to relieve the tension in his shoulders before facing his oldest son. "Killian will be free by morning." He lifted the whiskey to his lips and settled back in his desk chair. The office around him was orderly and sparsely decorated with brick walls and industrial metal furniture. It suited his needs just fine. "The Gardaí only have suspicions, no proof." Rhys Brannan clasped his hands behind his back, his stance rigid and unyielding. The dim light of the single bulb above the desk cast shadows over his sharply honed, emotionless face and accented the copper in his russet hair. "We were careful. We left no witnesses." "The car bomb in Dublin killed 3 guards and 7 civilians. Under other circumstances, I would consider that a grand success." Ned peered into his glass, considering. "But 2 of those 7 were Americans." A light sheen of sweat appeared on Rhys's forehead. "The goal was to hit the Garda headquarters. Additional casualties were expected." "Your brother sits in custody right now because the Americans want blood." Another rush of anger cooled before it could surface. Ned leveled his gaze with his son, his bronzed eyes unforgiving. "Some in the Irish Republican Army may disagree, but the added pressure to make arrest will weaken our ranks. They will try and scare Killian into giving them information, which he will not do. I cannot say the same about any others they lift." Rhys bowed his head in acknowledgement. "Either way, our message has been heard, Da. The fight continues." Ned gave a slight nod and took another drink of whiskey. It was his family's 200-year-old recipe, the one that had made Brannan a household name. Unknown to many and certainly unproven, that same whiskey brought in money he then shared with his IRA brothers. For years the cause had been funded by Brannan Irish whiskey, a proud product of Northern Ireland, a symbol of rebellion, a catalyst for revolution. "Boss?" The door opened to reveal Ned's oldest and most loyal associate, Ronan Campbell. He slipped into the room, a piece of paper clutched in his hands. He nodded to Rhys before facing Ned. "Can I have a word?" "Aye." Ned motioned for Rhys to leave them. Once alone, he studied the man before him. Ronan's bald head caught the light, his brown eyes sunken in a gaunt face prone to scowling. Of a wiry build and nearly too tall for the room, he looked younger than his 51 years, but every bit as shrewd. Ned set aside his drink. "Ye will arrange to get my son out of custody." It was spoken as an order, not a question. "He'll be out this time tomorrow," Ronan confirmed. "Good." One eyebrow lifted as Ned surveyed his old friend. "What is it, then?" "I found something you need to see." Ronan offered the paper he held, paused as Ned looked it over. First came the shock, then the distinct flicker of wrath. The page crinkled under Ned's fingers, almost tearing the image of a red-haired woman smiling with a glass of whiskey in her hand. His careful control nearly shattered as he stared into the eyes of a traitor. Forcing back the urge to rip apart the woman's face, he turned his attention to Ronan. "Where did you get this?" "The webpage for Lucky Fox Whiskey. It was added yesterday." Another wave of surprise hit Ned as he swallowed this new information. "She's in Kentucky." "It would appear so." The woman smiled up at Ned, mocking him. His hand shook as he downed the last of his whiskey, a sneer forming on his lips. Me cousin has been keeping secrets from me." "Money has been the only sign of his loyalty for years," Ronan reminded him. "His da had a traitorous heart. The son may be no different." "Aye." Ned tossed the paper on the desk, rubbed the golden-brown stubble on his chin. "Ye know what needs to be done." Ronan lowered his head a fraction, his dark eyes blazing. Without a word, he left the room. Turning the empty glass over in his hand, Ned glanced at the woman once more. Violence and betrayal exploded within his heart and inspired him at last to launch the tumbler at the wall. As shards of glass dripping with the remnants of his family's whiskey fell to the floor, a cruel smile deepened the hard lines of his face. He likened himself to a bloodthirsty hound, hot on the scent of a wily fox. Before long the hunt would come to an end, and he would, at last, make her pay for what she had done. I have never in my life seen a Kentuckian who didn't have a gun, a pack of cards, and a jug of whiskey. Andrew Jackson. Chapter 1. Fox Hills, Kentucky. "Pull!" Her eyes honed in on the flash of orange as it soared through the air. Instinct and skill guided her toward the exact moment to pull the trigger. The resulting blast kicked the shotgun into her shoulder, but she held her ground and watched with triumph as the clay pigeon exploded in a cloud of dust. With a hoot of laughter, she lowered the gun and faced her grandfather. "That's 5 for 5. Looks like I win." Joe Brannan cocked his chin, the unmistakable flavor of Ireland in his voice. "Now it's not over yet, dearie. Best out of 10 is what we said." "Best out of 5, Ava corrected with a wink. She blew a vivid red curl out of her face, checked her watch, and shrugged. "Oh, what the hell. We have a few minutes." "Sure we do." Joe nudged her out of the way, his own shotgun at the ready. He fitted it against the crook of his shoulder and chest and lifted his eyes to the sky. "Pull!" Ava released the trap and sent another clay pigeon hurtling into space. Within seconds, Joe fired and blew it to pieces. He cast a wicked glance her way, the dimples in his cheeks flashing. The chilly October wind sent strands of his thick white hair dancing. "That's 5 to your 5. Delighted by the challenge, she shifted into position. "We'll see about that." After settling the score at an even tie, Ava tucked her shotgun into its pink camo case. "You taught me to shoot so well that now you can't even beat me," she joked, her tone warmly southern with a hint of wood-fire smoke. It suited the rest of her body athletically built and lean, tucked into faded jeans and cowboy boots. Her grin was as quick and devious as her grandfather's, a testament to the Irish in her blood, while her heart would always belong to the South. Stowing his own gun away, Joe peered out at the expanse of their wooded 50-acre property and the scattered orange remains of their targets. "Aye, but you've never bested me on the rifle, have ye?" "Not yet, for now you're the master on the long range." She hooked her arm in his and led him to the side-by-side four-wheeler they used to get around the grounds. "But there's still time." They loaded the gun cases into the back of the four-wheeler and hopped inside, Ava in the driver's seat. She took off down the gravel road that led from their private shooting range to the family home and a ways farther to the Lucky Fox Whiskey Distillery. It was the pride and joy of their little town of Fox Hills and Joe's legacy. "Mama's gonna be mad we skipped lunch again," Ava mused as they drove past the sweeping ranch house with its wraparound covered porch and cheerful yellow paint. Burgundy and orange sassafras trees surrounded the home, their lemony scent tickling her nose. Joe chuckled. "Your ma will get over it. We've got more important things to do." "Like pick the barrel for your signature Lucky Joe's batch, in case you needed another reminder that you'll be turning 70 soon." "Aye, but a happy occasion it will be. I've much to be proud in me old age." Reaching for his hand, she smiled. "That you do." The road curved around a bend lined with yellow birch trees, bringing them to a massive stone-gray metal building that housed the distillery. Beside it was another small metal building used as the barrel house. At the top of each building hung the company logo, the silhouette of a running fox above bold vintage lettering that read, Lucky Fox Whiskey. Surrounding the structures were lofty elms, their leaves as golden as the drink made within the walls. Several cars were parked outside the visitor's center, which meant her 1 o'clock tour would be packed. Ava didn't mind, though. She had been entertaining tourists and locals alike since she had been barely legal to drink the whiskey herself. Now, at 27, the ins and outs of the distillery and every aspect of the product were as much a part of her as her own lightly freckled skin. They parked and headed into the barrel house. The 3-story high steel building was quiet and nearly as chilly as it was outside. All part of the aging process, Ava thought as she rolled down the sleeves of her red and black flannel shirt and admired the rows of oak barrels. Kentucky's cold winters and warm summers were as crucial to the process of making good whiskey as the corn it began as. The barrels were stacked 3 rows deep on either side of her on ceiling-high wooden racks, all properly labeled with the year and batch number burned into the wood. She caught the warm vanilla scent of sleeping whiskey and the earthy notes of charred oak. It was a fragrance she associated with home and, of course, tradition. A few employees wandered the rows with clipboards, keeping tabs on which barrels were ready to be emptied and which ones would benefit from time's delicate hand. "Which barrel should we be picking, dearie?" Joe asked, though she knew he was merely testing her. He would have his favorite in mind, and would be curious to see if she picked the same one. Knowing him as she did, she looked to the top rack, scanned the barrels. "Let's see. Since this will be your signature single-barrel bourbon, we can't be hasty in our decision." She walked along the aged pine floor, tapping her index finger to her lower lip. "We need something with a kick to it to suit your sharp eye and sharper tongue. A smooth burn was just never your style." He fell into step beside her, patiently listening. "You're an immigrant who chased your dream all the way to America after starting a feud with your own family over a disagreement on how whiskey should be made, so it has to have history, character, and a hint of rebellion." She faced him, her hazel eyes afire with pride. "With your humor and light-hearted approach to life, it can't be sophisticated, but rather humble and rough around the edges, just like the town you made your home." She angled her chin, decision made. "There's a 2006 barrel up on top there. That was the first time you won Distiller of the Year, and when you officially brought me on as your apprentice here in the distillery. It was also the year we tried increasing the percentage of rye in our recipe, because you felt like spicing things up. If I've learned anything from you, that barrel up there will have the perfect amount of bite, character, and history. And you'll get a kick out of presenting such a bold, unapologetic bourbon as your signature flavor." Joe gave a brisk nod and glanced up at the barrel. "Aye, that I would." "Well, is that the one, then?" "Sometimes I think ye know me better than I know me own self." He patted her shoulder, then pressed a kiss to her temple. Their eyes met, hazel into cornflower blue. "Some day you'll be making your own signature whiskey. I expect it'll have a bite to it as well." She flashed him a wicked grin. "As your granddaughter? No one would expect any different."